Hello there, and welcome to Sealed, the quiet corner of the night where curiosity is allowed to wander freely, and where science stretches itself out slowly, gently, until the unknown begins to feel a little closer, a little softer, a little more like home. Tonight we are not going down beneath the ice, or deep beneath the waves, or into the buried heart of some ancient forgotten place. Tonight we are going up past the clouds, past the last thin breath of our atmosphere, past the moon and the planets and the outermost edges of everything the sun still calls its own. We are going into the dark that lies between the stars. You have heard it called empty. You have heard it called a void, a vacuum, a nothingness so complete that it swallows sound and light and time itself. And in a way, that is true. If you could stand out there, in the space between one star and the next, you would find no ground beneath your feet, no air to breathe, no warmth to hold you. You would find a silence so deep it has no bottom. But here is the secret we are going to sit with tonight, turning it over slowly, like a stone, worn smooth by the sea. The silence between the stars is not as empty as you think. It never was. It is full of things we are only beginning to understand, full of movement and matter and memory, full of the quiet machinery that made the stars and made the planets, and in the end, made you. But before we drift out into that darkness, I would love to know, where are you listening from tonight? Whether you are curled beneath a warm blanket in a city that never quite sleeps, or lying in the stillness of the countryside where the stars still shine unbothered, you are welcome here. And if this gentle kind of wondering is the sort of thing that helps you rest, I would be deeply grateful if you would like this video, or subscribe to Sealed. It helps this quiet little place find more people who might need a soft moment too. Now, make yourself comfortable. Let your shoulders fall, let your breathing slow, and come with me, out past the edge of the world, into the space we were told was empty, to discover just how wrong that word has always been. Let us begin with the myth. Because before we can understand what truly fills the space between the stars, we have to understand what we imagine is there, and why that image, comforting and simple as it is, has never quite been real. When you picture the space between the stars, you probably picture nothing at all, a perfect blackness, a canvas stretched taut and empty, with a few bright pinpricks scattered across it like scattered grains of salt. It is the image we grow up with. The image painted in storybooks and on ceilings. The image that feels so obvious it hardly needs questioning. Space is empty. The stars are far apart. Between them lies a vast and absolute nothing. It is a tidy picture, and there is a kind of peace in it, but it is also, in almost every important way, mistaken. The trouble begins with distance, and with just how difficult it is for the human mind to hold a distance that large. The stars are far apart, yes, farther than any word can honestly convey. If you shrank the sun down to the size of a single grain of sand and set it on a table, the nearest other star would be another grain of sand placed some 10 miles away. Between those two grains, in our shrunken model, lies 10 miles of what seems to be empty air. And because that gap is so overwhelmingly vast compared to the tiny bright specks at either end, we conclude that the gap must be nothing, that the stars are the story, and the darkness between them is merely the blank page they are written on. But the darkness is not blank. The darkness is where the story is actually written. Think for a moment about the ocean. From an aeroplane, the sea can look like a single flat sheet of blue, featureless, still, empty of anything but water. But we know that beneath that surface lies an entire living world, layered and complex, teeming with currents and creatures and structures we are still discovering. The emptiness was only ever a trick of distance and perspective. We were simply too far away and looking too quickly to see what was truly there. The space between the stars is like that ocean. What looks like nothing from here is, up close, something. It is thin, unimaginably thin, thinner than the best vacuum we can create in any laboratory on Earth. But thin is not the same as empty, and across the enormous distances between the stars, even something as thin as a whisper adds up to something vast. Here is a number to hold gently in your mind as you rest. In the space between the stars, in the average patch of what we call empty, there is roughly 1 atom in every cubic centimeter. 1 single atom in a space about the size of a sugar cube. By any earthly standard, that is astonishingly empty. The air you are breathing right now holds tens of billions of atoms in that same small volume. Compared to your breath, the space between the stars is a desert beyond all deserts. And yet, that 1 lonely atom per sugar cube is not nothing. It is a presence. And when you gather all those lonely atoms together, across the immense reaches between the stars, across light year upon light year of so-called emptiness, they add up to a quantity of matter so large it staggers the imagination. There is enough of this thin material scattered through our galaxy to build billions of new stars. The emptiness, it turns out, is one of the largest reservoirs of substance in existence. Scientists have a name for this thin, drifting substance that fills the space between the stars. They call it the interstellar medium. It is not a poetic name, and it does not sound like much. But that plain, quiet phrase describes one of the most important and least appreciated things in all of nature. The interstellar medium is the gas and the dust and the invisible weather that fills the gaps between every star in every galaxy. It is the raw material from which stars are born, and it is the ash into which they crumble when they die. It is the stage, the scenery, and, in a sense, the plot of the entire cosmic drama. And for most of human history, we had no idea it was there at all. We looked up, saw the bright points of the stars, saw the black between them, and assumed the black was simply absence. We did not yet have the eyes to see the thing that filled it. Part of what makes the interstellar medium so easy to overlook is that it does not shine the way the stars do, at least not in the light our eyes can see. It hides. It reveals itself only in subtle ways, in the faint reddening of distant starlight, in the dark patches where the stars seem strangely absent, in the glowing veils of color we call nebulae, in signals that reach us not as visible light, but as radio waves and infrared, and the whisper of particles striking our instruments. To find it, we had to learn to look differently, to trust that the darkness was not simply the absence of something bright, but the presence of something dim. And once we learned that lesson, once we began to truly look, the empty sky filled up before our eyes. The gaps between the stars turned out to be not a void, but a fabric, woven from threads too faint to see until we knew to search for them. So let us set aside the myth of the empty sky, and let us hold instead a truer picture. Not a black canvas with a few bright specks, but a vast, dim, drifting ocean, faintly aglow, threaded through with currents and clouds, scattered with the finest dust, humming with invisible energies, and everywhere, thin as it may be, quietly, patiently full. That is the world we are traveling into tonight. And in the hours ahead, we will drift through its many layers, one by one, and discover just how much life and motion and meaning hides inside the silence we once mistook for nothing at all. To truly understand the space between the stars, you have to let go of the word emptiness altogether and replace it with a different word, ocean. Because the interstellar medium behaves far more like a sea than like a void. It has depths and shallows. It has warm regions and cold ones. It has dense clouds where matter gathers thick and heavy, and vast open stretches where it thins almost to nothing. It has tides and currents, though they move on timescales so slow that a human life is far too short to notice them. And like the ocean, it is not one single uniform thing. It is layered, structured, and endlessly varied, a place of many different environments blending into one another across the dark. Imagine, then, that you could drift out into this ocean, weightless and unharmed, protected somehow from the cold and the airlessness, and simply float there, letting your senses adjust to a world with almost nothing in it. At first, you would notice only the emptiness, the nearest star, a distant point of light, giving no warmth you could feel, the blackness pressing in from every side. But if you had instruments sensitive enough, if you could feel the faintest touch of the matter around you, you would begin to sense that you were not truly alone in the dark. You would feel the occasional gentle collision of a single atom drifting past. You would sense the faint pressure of light and particles streaming from distant suns. You would notice that even here, in what seems the emptiest place imaginable, the universe is quietly at work. The interstellar medium comes in several distinct forms, several different moods, and learning to recognize them is like learning to read the weather of the deep sky. In some places, the gas is hot, so hot it is almost beyond comprehension, heated by the violent deaths of stars to temperatures of 1,000,000 degrees or more. And yet this scorching gas is so unbelievably thin, so sparse, that if you drifted through it you would feel no heat at all, because there are simply too few particles to carry warmth to you. Heat, in the everyday sense, is not just about temperature. It is about how many particles strike you and how fast. And in the hot, thin regions between the stars, the particles move at tremendous speed, but arrive so rarely that you could float through a furnace of 1,000,000 degrees and freeze to death all the same. This is one of the strange and beautiful truths of the space between the stars. It can be blisteringly hot and utterly cold at the very same moment, depending entirely on how you choose to measure it. In other places, the gas is warm rather than hot, still thin, still faint, filling the broad open reaches of the galaxy like a mild and drifting mist. And in still others, the gas grows cool and gathers into denser pools, cold neutral clouds where atoms cluster more closely together, shielded from the harsh light of the stars. And in the coldest, densest, most sheltered places of all, the gas grows so cold and so thick that atoms begin to join into molecules, and the molecules gather into enormous dark clouds, and within those clouds, as we shall see, the most extraordinary thing in the whole cosmos begins to happen. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. For now, simply hold this picture, not one emptiness, but many environments. A hot, thin haze, a warm, drifting mist, cool, gathering pools, and cold, dark clouds, all blending together, all flowing into one another, all part of the single great ocean that fills the space between the stars. What holds this ocean together, what shapes its currents and stirs its depths, is a balance of forces playing out across unthinkable stretches of time. Gravity, patient and relentless, is forever trying to pull the thin material together, to gather it, to concentrate it, and against gravity push other forces, the pressure of the gas itself, the pressure of starlight, the turbulence stirred by exploding stars, the invisible tension of magnetic fields threading through the whole vast sea. These forces wrestle endlessly, gravity pulling inward, pressure pushing outward, and out of that slow, eternal struggle comes all the structure we see, the clouds and the clearings, the dense knots and the open voids. The space between the stars is not still, it is not settled. It is a living, breathing system, forever rearranging itself, forever churning, though so slowly that to our brief eyes it seems frozen in place. And here is something worth pausing on, something worth letting settle into you as you rest. This ocean, this thin and drifting sea between the stars, is not separate from us. It is not some distant realm that has nothing to do with our lives. It is where we come from. Every star you have ever seen, including our own sun, condensed out of this interstellar ocean, gathered together by gravity from a cloud of that thin, drifting gas. And the earth beneath you, and the water in your body, and the iron in your blood, and the calcium in your bones, all of it was once part of this ocean too, scattered across the dark, waiting to be gathered up and made into a world, and then into you. The space between the stars is not empty, and it is not far away in any way that truly matters. It is the source. It is the reservoir. It is the great slow sea out of which everything we know was drawn, and back into which everything will one day return. So as we drift onward tonight, deeper into the layers of this hidden ocean, try to hold that sense of belonging. You are not a visitor to this place. You are made of it. The atoms that think your thoughts and the atoms that drift between the stars are the very same kind, born in the very same fires, part of the very same endless flowing sea. And when we speak of the silence between the stars, we are not speaking of somewhere alien and remote. We are speaking, in the deepest sense, of home. Now let us go closer and meet the most abundant thing in that whole vast ocean, the gentle, ghostly, ever-present breath of hydrogen. If you could gather up all the matter that fills the space between the stars, all the thin gas drifting through the galaxy, and sort it by weight, you would find that the overwhelming majority of it is a single, simple thing: hydrogen, the lightest element there is, the first element to exist. A single proton with, most of the time, a single electron drifting around it, the humblest and most modest atom in all of nature. And yet this modest atom is the great raw material of the universe, the substance from which nearly everything else is eventually built. Hydrogen makes up roughly 3/4 of all the ordinary matter in existence, and in the space between the stars, it is everywhere, a vast and gentle presence filling the dark like breath fogging a cold window. Hydrogen was born in the very first moments after the beginning of everything, forged in the heat of the young universe before there were any stars at all. It is ancient beyond ancient, older than every galaxy, older than time as we usually measure it, and it has been drifting through the cosmos ever since, gathering into clouds, condensing into stars, being scattered again when those stars die, and drifting once more in an endless cycle that has repeated for billions of years. The hydrogen between the stars tonight is, in a very real sense, the same hydrogen that was there at the dawn of the cosmos, only rearranged, only recycled, passed from cloud to cloud again across the long ages. When you look up at the dark between the stars, you are looking at the oldest substance you will ever see. For a long time, we could not see it at all. Hydrogen between the stars, cold and thin and neutral, does not glow in ordinary light. It hangs there invisibly, filling the dark, giving no obvious sign of its presence. And so for centuries, even as astronomers mapped the stars in ever greater detail, the vast hydrogen ocean between them remained hidden, unsuspected, a great secret written in a language we could not yet read. But the hydrogen was speaking all along. It was singing, in fact, a single pure note, endlessly, across the whole sky. We simply did not have the ears to hear it. That note is a form of radio wave, produced when the electron in a hydrogen atom makes a tiny, subtle shift in its behavior, flipping like the gentlest turn of a key. Each flip releases a faint whisper of energy at a very particular wavelength, close to 21 centimeters. One atom doing this is far too faint to ever notice, but across the immense reaches of space, with countless atoms all whispering that same soft note, the whisper becomes a song, and the song fills the sky. When we finally learned to listen for that song, in the middle of the last century, the invisible ocean revealed itself all at once. Suddenly we could map the hydrogen between the stars, trace its clouds and currents, follow its flow through the galaxy. We could see, for the first time, the true structure of the empty sky, and what we found was breathtaking. The hydrogen was not spread evenly. It gathered into great sweeping arms that spiraled through the galaxy, into vast clouds and long, delicate filaments, into structures hundreds of light years across. The dark between the stars, which had seemed so featureless, turned out to have a shape, an architecture, a hidden geography that had been there all along, waiting patiently to be discovered. The song of hydrogen had been playing across the sky since long before there were any humans to hear it. And when at last we tuned our instruments to its quiet frequency, the universe seemed to open up like a book we had been holding upside down. The hydrogen between the stars exists in different states, different moods, much like the interstellar ocean as a whole. In the warm, open regions, it drifts as individual atoms, thin and neutral and calm. Near hot young stars, it is torn apart, its electrons stripped away by fierce radiation, glowing in beautiful shades of red and pink, in the great luminous clouds we call emission nebulae, and in the cold, dark, sheltered places, it does something remarkable. It pairs up. Two hydrogen atoms join together to form a molecule, and in these cold molecular clouds, hydrogen takes on yet another form, denser and colder and quieter than anywhere else. It is in these molecular hydrogen clouds, as we will soon see, that the great work of the cosmos is carried out, the slow and patient labor of making new stars. But whatever form it takes, hot or cold, atom or molecule, ion or neutral, hydrogen is always there, the ever-present breath filling the space between the stars, the foundation upon which everything else is built. There is something quietly moving about the humility of hydrogen. It is the simplest thing there is, the plainest, the most ordinary. It does not dazzle. It does not draw attention to itself. It simply exists, everywhere, patiently, in overwhelming abundance, the gentle backdrop against which all the drama of the stars plays out. And yet without it, nothing else could be. The stars would have nothing to burn. The galaxies would have nothing to form from. The universe would be dark and dead and still. It is the modest, invisible, ancient breath of hydrogen that makes everything else possible, that fills the silence between the stars with the raw potential for light and warmth and life. The next time you find yourself thinking of space as empty, remember the song of hydrogen, playing endlessly across the sky, and know that the dark is not silent, and it is not empty. It is breathing, softly, patiently, as it has since the very beginning of time. But hydrogen is not the only thing drifting in the space between the stars. Mixed in with that gentle gas, in far smaller amounts, but with far greater consequences than its tiny quantity might suggest, is something finer, darker, and stranger. Dust. Not the dust that gathers on a windowsill, though it is not entirely unlike it. Interstellar dust is a haze of impossibly small particles, grains far tinier than anything you could see, scattered thinly through the interstellar ocean. For every 100 parts of gas, there is only about 1 part of dust. It is a trace, a whisper, a mere garnish sprinkled through the vast hydrogen sea. And yet this faint scattering of dust shapes the space between the stars in ways so profound that without it, the universe would be a very different and far emptier place. Each grain of interstellar dust is a tiny marvel, a fleck of solid matter forged in the outer layers of dying stars and cast out into the dark. The grains are made of things like carbon, arranged something like soot, and silicates, the same family of minerals that make up sand and rock here on Earth. Some are coated in ices, in frozen water and frozen gases, built up layer by layer over long, cold ages. They are unimaginably small, most no larger than the particles in smoke, some so tiny they contain only a few hundred atoms. And they drift through the interstellar ocean in numbers beyond counting, so thinly spread that a column of space stretching for light years might hold only a handful of grains in any given path, and yet so numerous across the whole vast galaxy that together they add up to a hidden mass equal to millions upon millions of worlds. For all their smallness, these grains have an enormous effect on light. When starlight passes through a region rich in dust, the grains scatter and absorb it, dimming the light, softening it, stealing away its brightness. And they do this unevenly. Blue light, with its shorter wavelength, is scattered away more strongly, while red light, with its longer wavelength, slips through more easily. And so starlight that has traveled through the dust arrives at our telescopes not only fainter, but redder, its color shifted towards the warm end of the spectrum, as though the whole sky were seen through a veil of the finest smoke. Astronomers call this reddening, and for a long time it was a nuisance, a distortion that made distant stars seem farther and dimmer than they truly were. But once we understood it, the reddening became a gift, a way of measuring the dust itself, of mapping where it gathers thick and where it thins away. In some places, the dust gathers so thickly that it blocks the light of the stars behind it entirely. These are the dark nebulae, the great shadowy clouds that stretch across the glowing band of the Milky Way, like patches of spilled ink, like rivers of darkness winding through the light. For a long time, people looked at these dark patches and thought they were holes in the heavens, tunnels of true emptiness where no stars lay. But the truth is the opposite. They are not holes at all. They are the densest, richest, most crowded regions of the interstellar ocean, so thick with gas and dust that the light of everything behind them is smothered before it can reach us. The darkest places in the sky are not the emptiest, they are the fullest. Where the sky seems most vacant, matter is gathering most thickly, and something is beginning to stir. The dust does more than dim and redden and hide. It also protects, and it also builds. Deep inside the dense clouds, the dust grains act as tiny shields, blocking out the harsh radiation of the stars, creating cold, sheltered pockets where fragile molecules can form and survive. On the surfaces of the grains, atoms meet and join, chemistry unfolds, and complex substances are assembled that could never form in the naked openness of space. The dust is, in a very real sense, the workbench of the cosmos, the surface upon which the raw ingredients of the universe are combined into ever more intricate forms. And when new stars and new worlds condense out of these clouds, the dust becomes their building material, gathering together, sticking and clumping, growing from grains into pebbles, into boulders, into planets. The dust that dims the starlight is the same dust that, given time, becomes worlds. It is the same dust that, in the end, becomes us. So when you next imagine the space between the stars, do not imagine only the thin, ghostly gas. Imagine also the finest dark haze drifting through it, the faint scattering of grains forged in dying stars, dimming the light, reddening the sky, gathering into shadowy clouds, and quietly, patiently, building the future. The dust is a trace, a whisper, a mere hundredth part of the interstellar ocean, but it is the part that shapes the light we see, the part that shelters the chemistry of life, the part that gathers into worlds. In the silence between the stars, even the faintest whisper of matter carries within it the seeds of everything to come. There are places in the space between the stars where matter gathers not thinly, but thickly, where the gas grows so cold and so dense that it draws in upon itself, wrapping itself in darkness, folding inward into vast cathedrals of shadow. These are the molecular clouds, the coldest, quietest, most secretive places in the entire galaxy, and they are among the most important places in all of existence. For it is here, in these cold, dark cathedrals, that the stars are born. It is here that the interstellar ocean, so thin and so patient across most of its reaches, gathers itself together at last and begins the slow, miraculous work of making light. To understand a molecular cloud, you have to understand cold, real cold, the kind of cold that has no true equal in ordinary human experience. The gas inside these clouds hovers at a temperature only a little above the absolute limit, the coldest anything can possibly be, just a handful of degrees above the point where all motion very nearly stops. It is colder than the surface of any world, colder than the darkest winter, colder than anything you have ever touched or ever will. And in that profound cold, something changes in the behavior of matter. The atoms move so slowly, so gently, that when they meet, instead of bouncing apart, they can join, they can pair, they can build. Hydrogen atoms come together into hydrogen molecules, and other atoms, carbon and oxygen and nitrogen and more, drifting through the cloud, begin to combine into an astonishing variety of molecules, simple ones at first, and then, remarkably, complex ones. These clouds are enormous, far larger than the mind can easily hold. A single molecular cloud can stretch across hundreds of light years, can contain the raw material of hundreds of thousands, even millions of stars. They are the largest structures in the galaxy that hold together as a single thing, vast, dark continents of gas and dust drifting slowly through the spiral arms. and they are dark, truly dark, because the dust within them blocks the light of the stars beyond so completely that they appear as great voids against the glowing background of the Milky Way. If you have ever looked up at the summer sky, far from the lights of any city, and seen the bright band of the Milky Way split by dark rifts and channels, you have seen these molecular clouds, silhouetted against the light of 100 billion stars, hiding their secrets in shadow. Inside a molecular cloud, the balance of forces that governs all the interstellar ocean tips slowly towards gravity. For most of the space between the stars, the outward pressures win, and the gas stays thin and drifting. But in the cold hearts of these clouds, where the gas is dense and the temperature is low, and the pressure that would push things apart grows weak, gravity begins at last to gain the upper hand. Here and there, in the densest knots and cores of the cloud, matter begins to gather, to fall inward, to pull itself together into ever tighter, ever denser concentrations. It is a slow beginning, gentle and quiet, but it is the beginning of everything. For as the matter gathers and falls, as it presses inward under its own growing weight, it grows warmer at its center, and denser, and warmer still, and denser still, until at the very heart of the collapsing core, the pressure and the heat reach a threshold, and something ignites. A star is born. There is a beautiful and humbling symmetry in this. The cold, dark, silent places, the ones that seem most empty, most lifeless, most like the void we imagined space to be, are precisely the places where light is made. The darkness is not the opposite of the stars. The darkness is the womb of the stars. Every point of light in the night sky was once a knot of cold, dark gas in a cloud like these, gathering silently in the shadows until it grew heavy enough to catch fire. The sun itself, the star that warms you and lights your days, began this way, some billions of years ago, as a cold, dense core in a molecular cloud long since scattered, drawing itself together in the dark until it blazed into life. When we speak of the silence between the stars, we are speaking of the very place from which the stars themselves emerge. And within these clouds, alongside the making of stars, another quieter kind of creation is always underway, the chemistry of the cold, sheltered from harsh radiation by the surrounding dust, drifting slowly in the deep cold. Atoms and simple molecules meet and combine and build. We have found, drifting in these clouds, an astonishing variety of substances, hundreds of different molecules, some simple, some surprisingly complex, water, ammonia, alcohols, sugars of a kind. The building blocks, in their earliest and simplest forms, of the chemistry that living things are made of. In the cold, dark cathedrals between the stars, in the very places we once thought most empty and most dead, the universe is quietly assembling the ingredients of life, long before any star has formed to warm them, long before any world exists to hold them. We will return to this wonder later and sit with it more fully. For now, simply know that the cold, dark clouds are not silent tombs. They are cradles and workshops and quiet places of endless patient making. There is a peace to be found in contemplating these clouds as you rest. They move so slowly, live so long, work so patiently. A molecular cloud may drift through the galaxy for tens of millions of years, gathering itself, forming its stars, doing its quiet chemistry, in no hurry at all. It knows nothing of urgency, nothing of haste. It simply gathers and cools and builds across spans of time that make a human life seem like the flicker of a single moment. And out of that vast, unhurried patience comes all the light we see, all the stars, all the worlds. Perhaps there is something in that worth carrying with you into sleep, the knowledge that the greatest things are made slowly, in the dark, in the cold, in the quiet, without hurry and without noise. The stars themselves were made that way. And so, in your own slow-gathering way, were you. Beyond the gas and the dust, beyond the cold clouds and the newborn stars, the space between the stars is filled with something even harder to picture, something invisible, and intangible, and yet everywhere at once. Call it the invisible weather. For just as the air of the earth carries not only its gases but also its winds and its storms, its electric charges and its unseen currents, so the interstellar ocean carries a whole system of invisible forces and energies that shape it, stir it, and give it a subtle, restless life. There are winds between the stars, though not winds of air. There are magnetic fields, threading through the whole vast sea, and there is a constant rain of particles, so fast and so energetic that they cross the galaxy at nearly the speed of light. To truly know the space between the stars, we must learn to feel this invisible weather, blowing softly and endlessly through the dark. Begin with the wind. Every star, including our sun, breathes out a steady stream of particles, a wind that blows outward in all directions, carrying material away from the star and into the space beyond. From our sun, this stream is called the solar wind, and it fills the region around us, blowing past the planets, carving out a great bubble in the surrounding interstellar ocean. Other stars have their own winds, some far fiercer than ours, and these winds push out into the space between the stars, colliding with the drifting gas, stirring it, compressing it, sculpting it into shells and bubbles and delicate arcs. The great glowing shapes we see in many nebulae, the graceful curves and the intricate structures, are often carved by these stellar winds, by the breath of stars pushing against the surrounding sea. The space between the stars is not still, it is blown through, endlessly, by the exhalations of 1 billion suns. Then there are the magnetic fields. It may surprise you to learn that the whole galaxy is threaded through with magnetism, faint but pervasive, weaving through the interstellar ocean like an invisible net. These fields are unimaginably weak by the standards of a magnet you might hold in your hand, thousands upon thousands of times weaker. And yet, because they stretch across such vast distances and act upon the thin gas for such enormous spans of time, they have real and important effects. They guide the flow of the gas, channel it along invisible lines, resist its collapse, and shape the great structures of the interstellar clouds. The magnetic fields are like the grain in a piece of wood, an unseen pattern running through the whole medium, influencing how it bends and gathers and flows. When a molecular cloud collapses to form a star, it must contend with these fields, must work against them or along them, and the fields leave their mark on how the star is born. The invisible net of galactic magnetism is one of the quiet architects of the cosmos. And then, most energetic of all, there are the cosmic rays. These are not rays of light, despite the name. They are particles, tiny fragments of atoms, protons and electrons, and the nuclei of heavier elements, hurled through space at speeds so close to the speed of light that they carry astonishing amounts of energy. They come from the most violent events in the cosmos, from exploding stars and other cataclysms, flung outward and then guided and bent by the galaxy's magnetic fields, spiraling through the interstellar ocean in every direction. They rain constantly upon the Earth, upon you, passing through your body harmlessly, in tiny numbers even as you rest. And they fill the space between the stars, a constant sleet of high-energy particles, adding their own energy to the medium, warming it, ionizing it, stirring it in ways both subtle and profound. The silence between the stars is crossed, at every moment, by these swift invisible travelers, born in distant catastrophes, wandering the galaxy for millions of years. All of these invisible forces, the winds and the fields and the cosmic rays, work together with the gas and the dust to make the interstellar medium the complex, living, restless system that it is. They pour energy into it, stir it, prevent it from settling into stillness. They compress the gas in some places and disperse it in others. They govern where the clouds gather and where they thin away, where stars can form and where they cannot. The space between the stars is not a passive, static void waiting to be filled. It is an active, dynamic system, forever churning, forever alive, with invisible motion, shaped by forces we cannot see but can, with the right instruments, at last begin to measure. The emptiness, once again, dissolves the moment we look closely. What remains is weather, invisible weather, blowing endlessly through the dark. There is something almost comforting in this, if you let yourself feel it. The space between the stars, which seems so cold and so lifeless and so still, is in truth full of motion, full of energy, full of a kind of ceaseless invisible activity. The winds are always blowing, the fields are always threading through, the cosmic rays are always falling. Nothing out there is truly at rest. And in that endless invisible motion, there is a kind of life, not the life of creatures, but the life of a system, a great slow-breathing weather that has been blowing since the galaxy began and will go on blowing long after. As you drift towards sleep, you might imagine yourself floating in that gentle weather, the soft solar winds passing by, the faint magnetic net all around, the quiet rain of distant particles falling through you like the lightest of mists, harmless, endless, and strangely peaceful. We have spoken of the space between the stars as a silence, and in one true sense it is. Sound, as you know it, cannot travel through the near emptiness of space. Sound needs a medium thick enough to carry it, air or water or something dense, in which the vibration can pass from particle to particle in a steady wave. In the thin interstellar ocean, where atoms are separated by such vast distances, an ordinary sound would have nothing to travel through. If a star exploded beside you out there, you would hear nothing. If you cried out, no sound would carry. In that sense, space is truly, profoundly silent, and it always will be. And yet, the silence between the stars is not quite as complete as that simple picture suggests. For there is a kind of sound out there, after all, if you know how to listen for it. The interstellar medium, thin as it is, can carry waves. Not sound waves as we normally think of them, but waves all the same, pressure waves rippling slowly through the gas, and waves in the invisible sea of charged particles and magnetic fields that fills the space between the stars. These are vibrations, disturbances, patterns of compression and rarefaction moving through the medium, and in that sense, they are cousins to sound, distant relations of the vibrations that reach your ears every day. They move far too slowly and are far too low in pitch for any human ear to ever hear directly, but they are there, real physical waves passing through the interstellar ocean, and our instruments can detect them, can measure them, can even translate them into something we can hear. When our spacecraft traveled to the very edge of the sun's realm and passed beyond it into true interstellar space, they carried instruments capable of sensing these waves in the charged gas around them, and they detected them. Faint, steady vibrations in the interstellar medium, ripples in the thin plasma between the stars. When scientists took these measurements and shifted them into the range of human hearing, something extraordinary emerged. A sound, a faint, eerie, rising and falling tone, the voice of the interstellar medium itself, translated at last into something a human being could hear. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is a soft, strange, whistling hum, the sound of the space between the stars, gently vibrating. For all our talk of silence, the void has a voice, and when at last we listened, we heard it singing quietly to itself in the dark. Think of what that means. For all of human history, we imagined the space between the stars as the very definition of silence, of stillness, of nothing. And then we sent a small machine out past the edge of everything the sun still holds, and it reached back to us across the immense dark, and it told us that even there, in the emptiest place we know, there is vibration, there is motion, there is a kind of music. The silence, it turns out, has a texture. The stillness has a sound. The nothing was never truly nothing. It was only a note, too low, too faint, too slow for us to hear, playing endlessly across the dark, waiting for us to build the instruments that could finally catch it. And this hidden music is not merely a curiosity. These waves, these vibrations in the interstellar medium, are how energy and disturbance travel through the space between the stars. When a star explodes, it sends waves rippling outward through the surrounding gas, waves that compress the medium, that stir it, that can trigger the collapse of nearby clouds and the birth of new stars. The vibrations are part of how the interstellar ocean communicates with itself, how a violent event in one place sends its influence rippling out to touch places light years away. The music of the medium is not just something to marvel at, it is part of the great slow conversation of the cosmos. The way the galaxy passes messages through itself, the way the death of one star can, across ages, whisper the birth of another. The silence between the stars is full of these whispers, these ripples, these slow, low songs, forever passing through the dark. So let go, now, of the idea that space is silent in the way an empty room is silent. It is silent only to ears like ours, tuned to the quick vibrations of the air, to an instrument patient enough, sensitive enough. The space between the stars hums and whistles and sings, softly, endlessly, a music older than any melody ever written on Earth. And there is a deep peace in knowing that even in the emptiest, coldest, most distant places, the universe is never truly still, never truly silent. There is always a vibration, always a wave, always a faint, low song passing through the dark. As you settle towards sleep, you might imagine that song, drifting through the space between the stars, soft and strange and endless, the quiet voice of the void, singing you gently down into rest. We have drifted far out into the space between the stars, into the gas and the dust, the cold clouds and the invisible weather, the hidden music of the void. But let us now turn back for a moment towards home and consider the strange and beautiful boundary that separates our own small corner of the cosmos from the great interstellar ocean beyond. For the sun does not sit passively in the space between the stars, simply floating in the surrounding sea. It pushes back. It breathes out its wind, that steady stream of particles flowing outward in every direction, and this wind carves out a great bubble around the sun and all its planets, a vast region of space that the sun still calls its own. We live inside this bubble. It is our cosmic homeland, our shore, and its edge marks the true beginning of interstellar space. This great bubble has a name, the heliosphere, the sphere of the sun's influence, blown outward by the solar wind. It is enormous, stretching far, far beyond the orbit of the most distant planet, out past everything we usually think of as the solar system, into a region so remote that light from the sun takes many hours to reach its edge. Within this bubble, the space is filled not with the interstellar medium, but with the solar wind, with particles that came from the sun itself. It is, in a sense, the sun's own atmosphere, extended outward across an unthinkable distance, a great protective bubble holding back the surrounding sea. And at its outer edge, where the solar wind finally grows too weak to push any further, where it meets and balances against the pressure of the interstellar medium beyond, there lies a boundary, a shore, the very edge of the sun's country. We call it the heliopause. The heliopause is one of the most remarkable places in all of nature, though it is a place no human eye has ever seen. It is the border between two worlds. On the inner side lies the solar wind, the sun's own breath, warm and familiar, the medium of our home. On the outer side lies the true interstellar ocean, the gas and dust and cosmic rays of the space between the stars, cooler and denser and stranger, the medium of the wider galaxy. At the heliopause, these two meet and press against each other and hold each other in a slow and shifting balance. It is a shore where the sun's tide finally spends itself, where the outward push of the solar wind at last gives way to the surrounding sea. And to cross it is to leave the sun's country entirely, to pass out of the small warm bubble we call home and into the vast cold ocean beyond. For all of human history, no thing made by human hands had ever crossed that shore. And then, not so very long ago, something did. Two small spacecraft, launched decades before, having journeyed past all the planets and onward into the outer dark, finally reached the edge of the sun's bubble and passed through it, one after the other, into true interstellar space. As they crossed the heliopause, their instruments recorded the change, the shift from the thin, warm solar wind to the cooler, denser interstellar medium beyond. For the first time, we had touched the space between the stars directly, had reached out across the immense dark and felt, with our own instruments, the true substance of the interstellar ocean. It was a quiet crossing, unmarked by any dramatic sign, just a subtle change in the readings, a gentle passage from one realm into another. But it was one of the great voyages in the history of our species, the moment we first stepped, however faintly, beyond the shore of our own star. What those spacecraft found on the far side of the shore confirmed everything we have been sitting with tonight. The space between the stars is not empty. As they crossed into the interstellar medium, they measured the density of the gas around them, and they found that it was denser out there, in true interstellar space, than it had been inside the sun's protective bubble. The interstellar ocean pressed in around them, thin still by any earthly measure, but real, present, measurable, a genuine substance filling what we had once imagined to be a perfect void. And they detected the vibrations we spoke of earlier, the faint music of the medium, the soft hum of the interstellar plasma. Out there, beyond the shore of the sun, in the place we had always called empty, our small machines found a sea and heard it singing and sent word back to us across the dark. There is something deeply moving in the thought of those two spacecraft, tiny and alone, drifting now in the true interstellar ocean, far beyond the edge of the sun's country, still faintly calling home. They are the first emissaries of Earth to the space between the stars, the first things of ours to know that ocean directly, to float in it, to feel it, to become, in a sense, a part of it. And they carry with them, each of them, a message, a record of who we are and where we came from, in case they should ever, in some unimaginable future, be found by anyone or anything else drifting in the dark. They are our letter to the silence between the stars, our small brave attempt to reach across the emptiness and say, we were here, we wondered, we came as far as we could. And they drift onward, even now, out in the great interstellar sea, carrying that message slowly into the endless dark. As you rest tonight, you might think of them, those two small travelers, floating far beyond the shore of the sun, out in the true space between the stars. They are not lost. They are not truly alone. They are surrounded, as everything out there is surrounded, by the thin and drifting substance of the interstellar ocean, held gently in the great sea from which all of us came. And they remind us that the space between the stars, however far away it may seem, is a place we can reach, a place we have reached, a place that is not sealed off from us, but open, in principle, to our patient wondering. The shore of the sun has been crossed, the ocean beyond has been touched, and the silence, once and for all, has been found to be full. Almost everything we know about the universe beyond our own small corner has reached us in a single form: light, the light of the stars, crossing the immense dark to fall at last upon our eyes and our instruments, carrying with it the story of where it came from. And that light, on its long journey from the distant stars, does not travel through a perfect void. It travels through the interstellar medium, through the gas and the dust and the thin drifting substance of the space between the stars. And along the way, the medium touches it, shapes it, marks it, leaves its fingerprints upon it. The light that reaches us is not the same as the light that set out. It has been changed by its passage through the interstellar ocean. And in those changes, if we learn to read them, lies a wealth of hidden knowledge about the dark it crossed. Consider what a single beam of starlight endures on its journey to us. It may set out from a star thousands of light years away and travel for thousands of years through the space between the stars before it arrives. Along that immense path, it passes through clouds of gas and veils of dust. The dust dims it and reddens it, as we have seen, stealing away its blue light and letting the red pass through, so that by the time it reaches us we can read, in its altered color, how much dust lay along its road. The gas leaves its own marks, absorbing light at very particular wavelengths, carving thin, dark lines into the spectrum of the star. Each line the signature of a particular element drifting in the space the light passed through. When we spread starlight out into its rainbow of colors and examine it closely, we find it written over with these fine, dark lines, a hidden text inscribed by the interstellar medium, telling us exactly what the light encountered on its way. This is one of the most beautiful ideas in all of science, worth turning over slowly as you rest. The space between the stars, which cannot be seen directly, which gives off almost no light of its own, nevertheless writes its story into every beam of starlight that passes through it. Each distant star becomes, in effect, a lamp shining through the dark, and the shadows and colors it casts reveal the invisible medium in between. By studying the light of thousands upon thousands of stars, and reading the marks the medium has left upon each one, astronomers have mapped the interstellar ocean in extraordinary detail, charting its clouds and currents, measuring its density and its composition, tracing its structure across the whole vast galaxy, all without ever seeing the medium itself. We have learned to read the dark by the light that passes through it, and the marks the medium leaves tell us not only what is out there, but what it is made of, and in what proportions, and even how it moves. When the gas between the stars is drifting towards us or away from us, the dark lines it carves into the starlight shift, ever so slightly, towards the blue or towards the red. In the same way, the pitch of a passing sound seems to rise as it approaches and fall as it recedes. By measuring these shifts, we can tell how the interstellar gas is flowing, whether a cloud is rushing towards us or drifting away, how the great slow currents of the medium move through the galaxy. The light carries not just a portrait of the medium, but a record of its motion, a snapshot of the vast, slow tides of the interstellar sea, all encoded in the faint shifting of lines in a distant star's spectrum. The messengers crossing the dark bring us more than we ever imagined we could know. There is a deeper wonder here, too. The light that reaches us tonight from a distant star is old. It set out long ago, and it has been traveling ever since, crossing the space between the stars for centuries, for thousands of years, for longer. When it finally arrives, it shows us not the star as it is now, but the star as it was when the light departed. To look out into the space between the stars is to look back in time, to see the distant past arriving, at last, at the present moment. And the interstellar medium the light passed through is likewise a record of ages, its clouds shaped by events long finished, its composition built up over billions of years of stars living and dying. Every beam of starlight is a message from the past, carried faithfully across the dark, marked along the way by the ancient medium it crossed. When you look up at the night sky, you are reading letters written long ago, delivered slowly across the silence between the stars. And so the medium that fills the dark is not a barrier to our knowledge, but a messenger of it. Thin and invisible as it is, it speaks to us constantly, in the reddening of starlight, in the dark lines of absorption, in the subtle shifts of color that reveal its motion. It turns every distant star into a beacon shining through it, and it writes its own story into every beam. The space between the stars, which we once thought empty and silent and unknowable, turns out to be one of the most eloquent things in all of nature, forever telling us what it is, and where it is, and how it moves, if only we take the time to listen to the light. In the great dark ocean between the stars, even the silence speaks, patiently, endlessly, in the language of light. Now we come to perhaps the deepest truth of all about the space between the stars, the truth that ties everything we have spoken of tonight into a single great circle. The interstellar medium is not merely a place where stars are born and where light passes through. It is the beating heart of an endless cycle, a great slow turning of matter, from cloud to cloud again, that has been repeating for billions of years and will go on repeating for billions more. The stars are not permanent. They are born, they live, and they die. And when they die, they return their substance to the space between the stars, enriched and transformed, so that it may gather once more into new clouds, and new stars, and new worlds. The interstellar medium is where this great recycling happens. It is the crucible in which the universe remakes itself, over and over, without end. Follow the cycle around, slowly, and see how it turns. A cold, dark molecular cloud gathers itself in the space between the stars, and out of it, a star is born, condensing from the gas, catching fire, beginning to shine. For millions or billions of years, that star burns, and as it burns, deep in its core, it does something extraordinary. It forges new elements. In the fierce heat and pressure of its center, simple hydrogen is fused into helium, and helium, in older stars, into carbon and oxygen, and in the most massive stars, into a whole cascade of heavier elements, all the way up to iron. The star is a furnace of creation, building, atom by atom, the very elements that will one day make planets and oceans and living things. All of this happens quietly, deep inside, invisible from without, over the long ages of the star's life. And then the star dies. How it dies depends on its size. A modest star like our Sun, in its final ages, will swell and cool and gently shed its outer layers, casting them off into the space between the stars in a soft, expanding shell, a glowing cloud of gas that drifts outward and slowly merges back into the interstellar ocean. A massive star dies far more violently, collapsing suddenly and then exploding in a cataclysm of almost unimaginable power. A supernova, briefly outshining an entire galaxy and flinging its substance outward at tremendous speed. And in that explosion, in those final violent moments, the very heaviest elements are forged, elements too heavy to be made even in the core of a living star, gold and silver, and much more, created in an instant and scattered into the dark. Whether gently or violently, the dying star returns its matter to the space between the stars, and that matter is no longer simple hydrogen. It is enriched, seeded with all the heavier elements the star created in its life and death. This is the crucial turn of the cycle, the thing that makes everything else possible. When the interstellar medium was young, in the early ages of the cosmos, it was made almost entirely of the simplest elements, hydrogen and helium, and very little else. There was no carbon to speak of, no oxygen, no iron, none of the heavier substances that worlds and living things require. But as generation after generation of stars was born and lived and died, each one forging new elements and returning them to the medium, the interstellar ocean grew slowly richer, more complex, more fully stocked with the ingredients of worlds. Every star that has ever died has added its contribution, enriching the medium a little more, so that the clouds which form new stars today are far richer than the clouds of long ago. The space between the stars is not the same as it was. It has been built up, over billions of years, by the lives and deaths of countless stars, into the fertile, element-rich medium we find today. And so the cycle turns, endlessly. Cloud gathers into star. Star forges elements and shines. Star dies, and returns its enriched substance to the medium. Enriched medium gathers into a new cloud, richer than before. New cloud forms new stars and new worlds from the ashes of the old. Round and round it goes, matter flowing from the space between the stars into the stars and back again. Each turn of the wheel adding a little more complexity, a little more richness, a little more of the heavy elements that make interesting things possible. The interstellar medium is the great reservoir at the center of this cycle, the pool from which everything is drawn and to which everything returns. It is not a static void. It is a living system of birth and death and rebirth, a great slow breathing, an inhalation and exhalation of matter that has been going on since the galaxy began. There is a profound comfort in this, and a profound humility if you let the thought settle as you drift towards sleep. Nothing in this great cycle is truly lost. The matter of a dying star is not destroyed. It is returned, given back to the medium, made available once more for new creation. Death in the cosmos is not an ending but a giving back, a returning of substance to the great pool from which new life, new stars, new worlds will eventually be drawn. The atoms that make up the sun, and the earth, and your own body, were all forged in stars that lived and died long before our sun was born, and returned to the space between the stars, and gathered up again into the cloud from which our world condensed. You are not separate from this cycle. You are part of it, a temporary gathering of borrowed atoms, which will one day, in the fullness of time, be given back to the great turning wheel. And that is not a sadness. It is a belonging, deeper than any other, to the endless creative cycle of the stars. Let us sit, now, with the most intimate truth of all, the one that brings the whole vast story of the space between the stars home to the warmth of your own body as you lie there in the dark. The atoms that make you were made in the stars, and they traveled to you through the space between the stars. This is not a metaphor. It is not a poetic flourish. It is the literal, physical truth of your origin. The carbon in the cells of your body, the oxygen you are breathing, the nitrogen in the proteins that build you, the iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones. Every one of these elements was forged in the heart of a star, cast out into the interstellar medium, drifted through the space between the stars, and eventually gathered up into the cloud, from which the sun and the earth and, in time, you yourself were made. You are, quite literally, made of stardust, and that stardust reached you by way of the silence between the stars. Recall what we found drifting in the cold, dark molecular clouds, the cathedrals of shadow where stars are born. Not just simple gas, but molecules, hundreds of different kinds, some of them surprisingly complex. Among them are the building blocks of the chemistry of life, in their earliest and simplest forms: water, drifting frozen on grains of dust, simple sugars, alcohols, molecules containing carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen, joined together in the very patterns that living things are built from. These substances form in the cold and the dark of the interstellar clouds, on the surfaces of dust grains, sheltered from harsh radiation, assembled slowly over long ages by the patient chemistry of the cold. Before any star has formed, before any world exists, the space between the stars is already busy making the ingredients of life, quietly, in the dark, in the cold, in the silence. And when a star and its worlds finally form from such a cloud, these molecules do not simply vanish. They are incorporated into the new system, carried down onto the forming planets, delivered by drifting dust, and by icy bodies onto the surfaces of young worlds. The chemistry of life, begun in the interstellar clouds, is handed on to the newborn planets as a kind of inheritance, a starting gift from the space between the stars. When we study the most ancient and primitive bodies in our own solar system, the comets and certain meteorites that have preserved the original material of our birth cloud, we find these same molecules within them, the same organic compounds, the same building blocks, carried down from the space between the stars and preserved through all the ages since. The seeds of the chemistry that would one day become life were sown, it seems, not on Earth alone, but in the interstellar medium, long before the Earth existed. Think of what this means for the story of your own existence. It means that the line of your ancestry does not stop at your parents, or at the first living things, or even at the Earth itself. It reaches back, unbroken, into the space between the stars. The atoms that think your thoughts were forged in stellar furnaces. The molecules that pattern your cells trace their lineage to the cold chemistry of interstellar clouds. The very substance of you was assembled, gathered, delivered, across billions of years and unthinkable distances, by the slow, patient processes of the interstellar medium. You did not come from nowhere, you came from the stars, by way of the dark between them, and the silence we once thought empty is, in the most literal possible sense, the place your atoms called home before they called you home. There is a tenderness in this thought that is worth holding close as sleep draws near. The space between the stars, so cold and so vast, and so seemingly indifferent, is in truth the source of everything warm and living and dear to you. The same medium that fills the dark also fills your veins. The same atoms that drift between the stars also form your hands, your heart, your mind. You are not a stranger to the cosmos, cast adrift in an empty and uncaring void. You are the cosmos, gathered together for a little while into a form that can look up and wonder at itself. When you gaze into the silence between the stars, you are, in a way, gazing at your own distant origin, at the great dark sea from which you were drawn, and to which, in the fullness of time, you will return. And there is nothing lonely in that. There is only belonging, ancient and deep and true. So perhaps the ingredients of life are not rare. Perhaps they are woven into the very fabric of the space between the stars, forming in every cold cloud, delivered to every newborn world. Perhaps the same chemistry that began in the darkness of our own birth cloud is beginning, even now, in countless other clouds across the galaxy, sowing the seeds of who knows what possibilities on who knows how many distant worlds. We do not yet know, but we know that the raw materials are out there, drifting in the silence between the stars, the same materials that made us. And in that knowledge there is a great and quiet hope that we may not be alone, that the universe may be far more fertile than it looks, that the seeds of life may be scattered generously through the dark, waiting, as they once waited for us, for the warmth and the time and the chance to become something that lives and grows, and one day, perhaps, looks up and wonders. It is worth pausing, before we drift towards the end, to ask a simple and rather intimate question. Where, exactly, are we, right now, in this great interstellar ocean? We have traveled far tonight, out past the shore of the sun and into the wider sea. But our own small world does not float in some random patch of the medium. The sun, carrying the earth and all of us with it, is moving through a particular region of the space between the stars, a specific neighborhood in the galaxy, with its own local weather and its own local history. And knowing where we are, in this vast, drifting sea, brings the whole story a little closer to home. At this moment, the sun is passing through a thin, warm wisp of the interstellar medium, a small cloud of gas that astronomers have come to call the local interstellar cloud. It is a modest thing, as interstellar clouds go only a few dozen light-years across, thin and gentle, drifting through the galaxy at its own slow pace. The sun entered this little cloud some tens of thousands of years ago, in the deep prehistory of our species, and it will pass out of it again in some tens of thousands of years more, drifting onward into whatever lies beyond. For now, though, this is our immediate surroundings, the particular patch of the interstellar ocean that laps against the shore of the sun, the local sea in which our whole world is presently afloat. And this little cloud sits within something larger and stranger and rather wonderful. For the local interstellar cloud and several neighboring clouds like it all drift within a vast region of space that is unusually empty, even by the standards of the interstellar medium. Astronomers call it the local bubble, an enormous cavity in the interstellar ocean, hundreds of light-years across, where the gas is far thinner and hotter than in the surrounding galaxy. It is thought to have been blown open long ago by the explosions of dying stars, a series of supernovae that swept the region clear, pushing the gas outward and leaving behind a great warm hollow in the sea. And it is within this hollow, this bubble carved by ancient stellar deaths, that our sun and its little cloud are presently drifting. We live, it seems, inside the fading echo of long-ago explosions, in a clearing swept open by the deaths of stars we will never see. There is something quietly humbling in this picture, something worth resting in as sleep draws nearer. Our world, our whole familiar solar system, is not fixed in place. It is moving, always, through the interstellar ocean, drifting through cloud after cloud across the long ages, carried along on the sun's slow journey around the galaxy. The medium around us is not the same as it was in the distant past, and it will not be the same in the distant future. We are travelers, passing through, And the space between the stars is not a static backdrop, but a changing sea through which we are forever sailing. The very cloud that surrounds us now is one we entered long ago and will one day leave behind. A temporary harbor in an endless voyage across the dark. And that voyage is slow beyond all human reckoning. The sun takes hundreds of millions of years to complete a single circuit of the galaxy, sweeping through the spiral arms, passing in and out of denser regions and thinner ones, drifting through cloud after cloud, in a journey so vast that all of recorded human history is but the tiniest fraction of a single step. Along the way, the interstellar medium around us changes, thickening and thinning, warming and cooling, and these slow changes may leave their mark over immense spans of time on the light and warmth that reach the Earth, on the climate of our world, on the long story of life itself. We are not sealed away from the space between the stars. We are moving through it, shaped by it, part of its slow currents. Even now, even as you rest, drifting gently onward through the local sea. So the next time you look up at the night sky, you might hold this thought quietly in your mind. You are not standing still beneath a fixed and distant firmament. You are aboard a moving world, sailing slowly through a thin, warm cloud in the space between the stars, inside a great bubble carved open by ancient explosions, on a voyage around the galaxy so long that no human will ever see even a fraction of it completed. And yet here you are, for this brief moment, aware of it all, able to look out at the sea you are sailing through and to wonder at it. There is a kind of grace in that, in being a small, conscious traveler on a drifting world, awake for a little while in the midst of an endless voyage through the dark. It is worth remembering, too, as we near the end, that everything we have spoken of tonight was once entirely unknown. For nearly all of human history, no one suspected that the space between the stars held anything at all. The idea that the dark was full, that it held a whole ocean of gas and dust and invisible weather, would have seemed absurd, even unimaginable, to almost everyone who ever lived. The discovery of the interstellar medium, the slow unveiling of the fullness of the dark, is one of the quietest and most beautiful stories in all of science, and it is a story of patience, of looking closely, of refusing to accept that the emptiness was truly empty. For a very long time, the sky was simply the stars and the black between them, and the black was thought to be nothing. But here and there, careful watchers of the heavens noticed things that did not quite fit. They saw those strange dark patches in the glowing band of the Milky Way, the rifts and channels where the stars seemed to vanish, and they wondered what could cause them. They noticed that certain distant stars seemed dimmer and redder than they ought to be, as though something lay between. They found faint, glowing clouds scattered across the sky, luminous veils that were clearly not stars, and puzzled over what they might be made of. Clue by clue, observation by observation, over many long years, a suspicion grew that the space between the stars was not empty after all, that something thin and dark and difficult to see was drifting out there in the gaps. The final confirmation came slowly, as our instruments grew ever more sensitive, as we learned to spread starlight into its colors and read the fine, dark lines written there, as we built machines that could listen for the faint radio song of hydrogen and detect the invisible glow of the dust. Each new way of looking revealed more of the hidden ocean, until at last, the fullness of the dark could no longer be denied. The space between the stars, once thought the very definition of nothing, was found to be one of the great substances of the universe, the reservoir of starbirth, the crucible of the elements, the medium through which all light must pass. It took centuries of patient looking, of trusting that the silence had something to say, of refusing to be satisfied with the simple story of the empty void. And the reward was one of the deepest discoveries we have ever made, that the darkness was full all along. There is a lesson in that patience, a lesson that reaches beyond astronomy into the whole of how we come to know anything at all. The truth was there the whole time, waiting in the dark, singing its quiet song, writing its story into the starlight. It was not hidden out of any malice. nor sealed away beyond all reach. It was simply faint and subtle and easy to overlook, and it asked only that we look more closely, more patiently, more humbly than we had before. And when at last we did, the empty sky filled up before our eyes with wonders we had never dreamed of. So much of what seems empty in this life, so much of what seems silent or still or blank, may be like that dark between the stars, full of something we have simply not yet learned to see. The universe rewards the patient watcher, the one who trusts that the silence is worth listening to. And the space between the stars is the greatest proof of that reward we have ever found. And so we come, gently, to the end of our long drift through the space between the stars, and to the deepest truth we have been circling all along. The silence between the stars is not empty. It never was. We began with a myth, the myth of the void, the black canvas with its scattered points of light and its vast, dead nothing in between. And one by one, layer by layer, we have watched that myth dissolve. We found an ocean where we expected a void. We found the ancient breath of hydrogen, singing its endless, quiet song. We found the finest dust, dimming the starlight and building the worlds. We found the cold, dark cathedrals where stars are born, and the invisible weather blowing endlessly through the dark, and the faint, strange music of the medium, and the enriched substance flowing round and round in the great cycle of birth and death and rebirth. And we found, at the very heart of it all, the seeds of ourselves. The emptiness, examined closely, turned out to be the fullest thing there is. This is worth carrying with you, not just into sleep tonight, but into your waking life as well. So often we mistake silence for absence, stillness for emptiness, quiet for nothing. We look at what seems blank and conclude that there is nothing there. But the space between the stars teaches us to look again, more slowly, more patiently, more humbly. It teaches us that the quietest places may be the most full, that the darkest clouds may hold the brightest futures, that the emptiest looking reaches may be precisely where creation is quietly at work. What seems like nothing is so often something we have simply not yet learned to see. And the universe, again and again, rewards those who look closely at the silence with the discovery that it was never truly silent at all. There is a peace in this that runs very deep. If the space between the stars, the coldest and emptiest and most distant place we can imagine, is in truth full of substance and motion and meaning, full of the ingredients of light and life, then perhaps we need not fear emptiness anywhere. Perhaps the quiet moments, the still moments, the moments that seem empty of anything happening, are also full, in ways we cannot always see. Perhaps rest itself, the quiet, dark stillness you are drifting into now, is not an absence but a fullness, a gathering, a slow, patient making, like the cold clouds gathering themselves in the dark until they are ready to bring forth light. The space between the stars does its greatest work in silence, in cold, in darkness, without hurry and without noise. And so, perhaps, do you. Let your mind drift, one last time, out into that great dark ocean between the stars. Feel how it is not empty, but full, the thin gas all around, the faint dust, the invisible weather, the quiet music passing through. Feel how it stretches on and on, vast beyond imagining, and yet is made of the very same substance as you. Feel how the stars are born from it and return to it, how the light crosses it carrying ancient messages, how the seeds of life drift within it, waiting. And feel, most of all, that you belong to it, that you are not separate from this great dark sea, but a part of it, a small warm gathering of its ancient atoms, borrowed for a little while, and held, always, within the greater whole. There is nothing to fear in that darkness. There is only home, vast and quiet and full, holding you as it has always held you, as it holds everything that is. The silence between the stars is not as empty as you think. It is full of gas and dust and the birth of stars. It is full of invisible winds and ancient songs. It is full of the great turning cycle of matter and the seeds of every living thing. and the very atoms that make you who you are. And tonight, as you let go at last and sink down softly into rest, you can carry with you the quiet knowledge that you are held within a universe far richer, far fuller, and far more your own than you were ever told. The dark is not empty, the dark is full, and you belong to it, gently, completely, forever. Sleep now. The stars are watching over you, and the space between them is not empty. It is full of everything that ever made you. Rest well and drift, and let the fullness of the silence carry you softly down into sleep.